Good evening. My name is Tim Neff, and I'm a Director of Museum and Education at Soldiers and Sailors Memorial Hall and Museum, located in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I would like to welcome you to our monthly program called Spotlight On. This program takes place the second Thursday of each month, and we explore different topics related to our museum's mission and talk about some of the interesting artifacts that we have in our collection and also some of the amazing stories of the veterans that have served this area. If you're joining us for the first time, thank you. And if you're joining us again, welcome back. And a little bit about Soldiers and Sailors, in case you are new. Let me pull up our slideshow here and talk about Soldiers and Sailors here, which is located, like I said, in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We're right in the Oakland neighborhood by the University of Pittsburgh. And it's a beautiful facility and building that was built back in 1910 as a Civil War memorial. It honored the 25,000 men who served in the Union Army from Allegheny County, but since then has become a memorial and now a museum that honors all veterans, all the men and women who have served in our military, the Civil War through present day. And our exhibits in our halls are filled with artifacts that have been donated to us through the years by veterans and their families. And we use these objects to honor their service and to tell their story. It's a wonderful place to work and a wonderful place to visit. If you haven't been in a while, I encourage you to come and see the museum. If you have been here before, we'd love to have you back. And you can always learn more at our website, soldiersandsailorshall.org, to learn all about how to visit the museum and upcoming events and all the happenings going on at Soldiers and Sailors. If you have any questions during tonight's program, please feel free. All you have to do is comment on Facebook, and we'll see the question come up, and we'll answer it during the broadcast here. If you're watching on YouTube, you do have to email us at soldiersandsailorspittsburgh@gmail.com. We may not be able to get you an answer tonight, but we will get back to your email with our best answer as soon as we can. So please feel free to any questions you have. Do not hesitate to ask. And tonight's program is going to focus on the Silver Star. And this is a nice, I think, complementary piece to our last month's program, which focused on our Hall of Valor program at Soldiers and Sailors. We talked about how just this past March 29th, we inducted 6 new members into our Hall of Valor. And we talked last month about those inductees and some of the Medal of Honor recipients that are a part of that program. But another medal that is recognized in our Hall of Valor is the Silver Star. So we thought we would kind of complement last month's program with this one and talk about the Silver Star. And we'll get into a little bit of its history and kind of, how it came about. And we'll talk about some of the stories from our collection of recipients of this prestigious medal here. And of course, joining me tonight, as usual, is our curator of collections, Michael Krauss. How you doing, Michael?
Great, Tim.
Thanks for joining us again. I know both of us, I think, learned quite a bit reading up on this program. We're certainly familiar with the Silver Star, but there's a little bit of history I learned. And it's always great to dive even deeper into the stories. I think, we get very familiar with the citation language. And to be clear, the citations are what the exact write-up of why the individual received the award or the medal. And we'll be referring to those citations tonight throughout the program. But, there's always more to the story than just a citation. And when we do these programs, it gives even us that, that work at Soldiers and Sailors the opportunity to dive in a little bit deeper and get some more of the story from behind the scenes, if you will. So with that said, I think we're going to jump to the Silver Star medal. Here's a photo of one of the medals in our collection. It's laying on top of the box that the medal usually comes in there. And Michael, you want to start us off here with just a little history of the Silver Star, how it got started, and some of the meaning behind the symbolism of the medal itself?
Sure, Tim. Like you say, it's a Valor Award, and there are different tiers of Valor Awards. The Medal of Honor, of course, being the highest. The next below that would be Distinguished Service Cross, and then Silver Star. So it is a very distinguished combat medal, and it originated sort of in World War I. Although it wasn't called the Silver Star, it was called the Citation Star, and it didn't appear like this as a medal. It simply was a little silver star that was affixed to a ribbon bar. Now, in kind of tipping a hat to that, the current design, or the design that was initiated, by the way, in 1932 is when this medal becomes a standard part of the military decorations. In recognition of that, they put the little silver star, the citation star, inside of this star, and you can kind of clearly see it there.
Yeah, and you also get a nice look at the ribbon up above the medal there, and of course that's what you would wear on your chest. You don't usually wear the medal, of course. You wear the ribbon that represents the medal, so you can see the color scheme there for the ribbon as well. And I thought I'd just take a quick minute just to read. This is the exact kind of definition I found for the Silver Star, and I think the reason I wanted to read this is because there's language here that just appears so often in many of the citations. There's some consistency in the language that you see when you're talking about these medals and their citations. So it's for gallantry displayed must have taken place while in action against an enemy of the United States, while engaged in military operations involving conflict with an opposing foreign force, or while serving with friendly foreign forces engaged in an armed conflict against an opposing armed force in which the United States is not a belligerent party. So you get, some of these key factors that include, during combat situations, engagement with the enemy, and involving conflict. So some of the criteria that are involved with the Silver Star Medal. I also found that there's no exact record of, how many Silver Stars have been awarded through the years. It's estimated that it's between somewhere around 100,000 and 150,000 medals have been awarded through the years. And I did find one gentleman who is not from the Pittsburgh or Pennsylvania area, so he's not a part of our museum, but Colonel David Hackworth is basically credited, or most likely, let's say, to have received the most Silver Star medals. And he actually received 10 Silver Stars in his service in Korea and Vietnam. So obviously he has an amazing story, but we've got some amazing stories ourselves for the program tonight. But before we jump into some of those stories, I think, Michael, you wanted to clear up a little bit of confusion that sometimes comes about with the Silver Star. And that involves, especially when you're talking World War I and the campaign star, right? Right, Michael, what are we looking at here?
Yeah, that's right. The stars that you see appearing above on the victory medal, the World War I victory medal, often we will get people bringing their family history to us, and they will say, "My grandfather was a recipient of a Silver Star because there's one on his ribbon, World War I ribbon," and that's not really true. These stars were campaign stars. If you look at the medal below, that's the ribbon above with 5 stars, and the medal is below with 5 campaign bars on it. So that's the reason why there's 5 stars. Now, there was one division, I can't remember if it was the 3rd or 4th division, that had their own gallantry award, similar to a Silver Star in World War I, but it would not be a Silver Star like we know it. It would be a campaign star, and that's where some of the confusion comes in for some of our visitors.
Yeah, I know as somebody that runs the Hall of Valor program and gets a lot of the inquiries about what qualifies and what doesn't. That is a common question that comes up in the confusion between the two. So,
plus they might also think it's the Bronze Star, because the other ones are a bronze color.
Yeah,
so
right.
That's not true. They're campaign stars.
Yeah. Yeah, so we wanted to clear that up before we get too deep into the program here. I also thought I'd take a quick moment just to recognize some kind of our more recognizable names that have received the Silver Star. We're looking at 3 pretty big names in American history here, among many. There's a longer list we could have gone into, but I just wanted to acknowledge a couple individuals here, including General Benjamin O. Davis, who, of course, was a commander of the World War II Tuskegee Airmen. He flew 60 missions and was one of the first African-American pilots to see combat. And his citation basically reads that he received it for aerial operations over Austria in 1945, and he led his fighter group in a strafing attack on rail targets, which resulted in damage or destruction of 35 locomotives, 52 railroad cars, 4 barges, and 1 enemy airplane. And for those actions, he received the Silver Star in World War II and would go on to be one of the highest, at the time, the highest ranked African-American in our military. So wanted to recognize his award of the Silver Star. Then next to him is a name that I think everybody will recognize is General George S. Patton. And General Patton actually received the Silver Star for his service in World War I before he really became famous in World War II. And his citation is pretty general. It just says, in action in France during World War I, and his gallant actions and dedicated devotion to duty, demonstrated by Lieutenant Colonel Patton without regard for his own life, is some of the language there. And I think, you're getting the sense here of this. Sometimes the medal, and most of the time when we're talking about, is going to be for a specific action. But here's more of a general, just kind of award for, buildup of service, a couple different events, just kind of an achievement award for a span of time. So for his service in World War I, he is recognized with the Silver Star there. And then finally, we have Lyndon Johnson, of course, President of the United States, the 36th president, served in the United States Navy in World War II and continued to serve in the Navy Reserves until 1964. He reached the rank of commander, but in World War II, he received the Silver Star. Like I said, as a part of the Navy, he volunteered as a forward observer and saw some hazardous aerial combat conditions over New Guinea. They developed mechanical trouble and was forced to turn back, but he evidenced very coolness in spite of the hazards involved, and his gallant action enabled him to obtain and return with valuable information. So that was during World War II. And of course, he would go on, as I said, to become president of the United States. So you can research the Silver Star and see a lot of big names that have received it through the years. But I just wanted to credit to these three individuals that we pulled out as examples here. Okay, so I think we're going to now get into before we do, I also wanted to take a moment to acknowledge Matthew Bunker Ridgway. He's a guy that has some very close ties to the soldiers and sailors. He's been to he came to visit the museum when he was alive and living in this Fox Chapel area towards the end of his life. He served, of course, in World War II and in Korea. In Korea, he was succeeded General MacArthur after Truman fired MacArthur. He became the overall commander of our armed forces in Korea, and he actually received 2 Silver Stars, both in World War II. And one of them I thought was pretty significant here. They're both amazing, but the one here was about building a bridge over the Elbe River late in the war in Europe. This is in April of 1945, so shortly before the German surrender. And he moved among the Dugan troops and encouraged them to proceed with their work. And basically, in the face of fire, was exposing himself, but getting the men motivated to work, and they completed the bridge in record time. So we wanted to acknowledge him. We have several items of Bunker Ridgway in our museum. I think right now, most notably on display, we have some flags from his headquarters and from his office. And like I said, he was not from the Pittsburgh area, but he spent the later years of his life in the Fox Chapel area here in the city. And like I said, had visited soldiers and sailors on multiple occasions. All right, now we're going to get into some of the individuals who are in our Hall of Valor at Soldiers and Sailors. And the first individual here is Michael Tamasco, and he is born in Duquesne, PA, but ended up living, I believe, in the Baldwin area is where he enlisted from. And he's unique because he actually received more than 1 Silver Star, right, Michael? We're looking at somebody here that has multiple awards.
Yeah, he's the recipient of 3 Silver Stars. 2 of them were in 1943, and the third one was after the invasion in Normandy. I'd also like to say, when we're talking about him and his background, he was born in Duquesne, but his grandfather wrote his father in 1937, in 1921, and was having trouble in Slovakia. So his father and Michael moved to Slovakia. So he grew up there, spent a lot of time there, and came to the U.S. then in 1937, and subsequently joined the Army. So he's not an immigrant, but he's immigrant family and lived in Slovakia for a while. So he has 3 Silver Stars. And I think we have part of his citation here. Were you going to read part of that, or did you?
Yeah, I can. It's 3 very brief descriptions here. The first one was while reconnoitering territory beyond our front lines, Tamasco, challenged by 2 enemy sentinels, he quickly destroyed them and continued his mission. He received his first oak leaf cluster. This is something we've talked about in the past. Maybe we should address, Michael. What does it mean when you hear oak leaf cluster?
That's a multiple award. So if you get, let's say, your first Silver Star, that's the medal, and then if you got a second one, you get a small device that is affixed to the ribbon and to the medal. It's a little oak leaf, and that signifies the second one. So Michael Tamasco had 2 oak leaf clusters, and the medal represented the first, and the clusters second and third.
Right. So the first one, as I said, that was in Tunisia that he got the first one. The second one was in Sicily, where he daringly proceeded over open terrain under heavy enemy small arms fire to ascertain hostile positions and determine their vulnerability, thus contributing to successful advance against strong enemy forces. And then the second oak leaf cluster was for action in the vicinity of Normandy on August 13th, 1944, and he repeatedly exposed himself to intense fire to more advantageously maneuver the personnel and weapons of his platoon to accomplish his mission of securing a strategic bridge and capturing an enemy-held town. So it truly feels like he was the guy that was kind of always up front, right? Always kind of going out.
Oh yeah, he's a fighter.
Fire. Yeah, he's going to be the one that's going to go out to try to determine enemy positions, gather information, and putting his life at risk all along the way. And he did receive 2 Purple Hearts. And Michael, I think we were talking, one of those Purple Hearts led to a wound that affected him the rest of his life.
Yeah, I want to back up just a second to say that we don't show it here, but he was in the Big Red One, the 1st Division, in the 16th Infantry. And if you know your D-Day history, that's one of the assault regiments that came ashore in the very first wave. So Michael Tamasco was wounded twice. The second time, he was treated by a captured German doctor, and he was wounded in the leg. The doctor left a piece of gauze in his leg, which eventually caused gangrene. And Tamasco first had his foot amputated, and then his leg below the knee. So that put him out of the war. His family said that he wore a prosthetic, but you would never know it. He walked naturally and carried himself as if he had both legs. So this guy. He goes through a lot. You get 2 Purple Hearts and 3 Silver Stars is quite a feat.
Yeah, and we have in our next slide here, this is a look of that complete package there of his Silver Star medal and the 2 oak leaf clusters that we described earlier. You can see that there up close and get that visual there. This, of course, is a part of our collection at Soldiers and Sailors. This was in a display, correct, in the Hall of Valor, right, Michael?
Yes, that's correct.
On display in our Hall of Valor room. And then we also have here, I know, Michael, this is where we can get a little bit more into some of the different kind of devices that we see on these ribbons, because he's, of course, got a lot going on here, as we just kind of talked about. What are we seeing here on his ribbons, Michael?
Sure, I'm going to start on the right-hand side. Of course, the combat infantry badge, signifying 30 days or more in combat. Below that is the Silver Star with 2 oak leaf clusters. Below that, from left to right, is the Purple Heart with a cluster, indicating 2 wounds. Center medal is the Good Conduct Medal. To the right is the European Theater of Operations Medal. And you'll see on that, we have a blow up on the left, that there is a Silver Star and there is a Bronze Star. Those are not medals. When there were 5 battle honors that were recorded, that would, instead of having all the stars like we saw in the World War I medal, they reverted to a single Silver Star. So there's 5 battle honors plus a 6th one. There's 6 battle honors represented on that European Theater of Operations medal.
Yeah, and I think I wanted to point out that he was inducted into our Hall of Valor in 1991. And he did pass away in 2001, but obviously lived a pretty full life, even with his prosthetic leg, long after the war. I think I read that he worked on one of our nuclear submarine, or the first atomic-powered submarine, the Nautilus, while working at Westinghouse. I mean, clearly went a long way. If I could find it here, there was a great quote from his daughter, who said, "If you had spoken to him more than half an hour, you'd know that he was faithful to his country and was a soldier." So I think she recognized and summed up his demeanor and just everything about him. This is what he was all about. So what an honor. We were very lucky to have his story and his items as a part of our collection at Soldiers and Sailors. Our next individual here is Captain Herbert M. Krauss, United States Army, World War II, 1944. And first of all, of course, this is no relation. You can see the different spelling there between Herbert and Michael. But he's a more recent inductee. He was inducted in 2019. And Michael, what do you know about Herbert's story? And I know we have a couple of his items as well that we'll show here in a moment.
Yeah, he was part of the invasion force arriving on early in the campaign. He wasn't in the first wave. He was a communications officer. So he traveled making sure communications were being set up. Traveled in a Jeep with a little contingent of men who were running wire for communication or just calling back positions. And it was his citation was for action near St. Mary Glees on 7 June to 11 June. And he assumed command and control of a motor column converging on a road junction that was under effective enemy artillery barrage. And with utter disregard for his own safety, he was instrumental in removing burning trucks and other obstacles that were holding up the advance of the motor columns at a critical time. He later personally led the vehicles through the districts of St. Mary Glees while the town was being heavily shelled by the enemy. On 11 June 1944, when the regiment was approaching Montbourg, Captain Krauss while directing the installation of communications, repeatedly exposed himself to great danger in order to assure the availability of communications. In that, while doing that, he stepped out of his Jeep and he was near some hedgerows, famous hedgerows in France, and he moved a little bit forward of the Jeep to observe what was going on. And when he did that, an enemy artillery shell came and scored a direct hit on the Jeep and killed the occupants. Krauss was wounded at that time. A piece of shrapnel hit him in the eye, which resulted in the loss of his eye. So his war was over pretty quickly after the invasion, but he does get recognition with this Silver Star for his gallantry and the important role that he played.
And I think our next slide here, we see his uniform on display. There you can see his Silver Star and his Purple Heart down below the uniform next to his photo there. And this is on display, of course, in our D-Day exhibit, because we are talking about, he wasn't in the first wave, but he came in shortly after. I thought I'd take a moment here. This is from his memoirs. He has a pretty detailed memoirs that he submitted when he was put into the Hall of Valor. And I just thought the description here, even though it wasn't the first wave of the invasion, he has a very, I think, poignant description of his arrival on Utah Beach. And it starts with, "When I stepped off the bobbing landing craft into the icy waist-deep surf, I gasped from the shock. But my sickness ended abruptly. Pushing slowly through the blue-gray water past enemy obstacles and wreckage, I headed for the beach, holding my carbine over my head. I tasted salt as the big waves splashed my face. I could feel the sweat in my armpits. Sergeant Tom Cooley of Detroit, my wire chief, and Hunk O'Hare, one of my radio men, were trudging nearby, leaning forward with each step. I could hear the soft swish of our naval artillery going overhead. Our rocket launchers were firing rapidly, one red streak after another, arching gracefully through the hanging curtains of smoke and fog. The acrid air, the crash of German shells pounding craters on the beaches, it all seemed like a movie. But the bodies lying crumpled grotesquely face down in the water were real. There was no banter between the men now. Each had his own thoughts. Mine were that I might not get out of this one in one piece. I would take it as it comes." So just a pretty amazing firsthand account of his arrivals at Utah Beach. And as Michael said, he was wounded, and he ended up spending 20 months in 8 different hospitals for recovery. And I found these interesting photos in his Hall of Valor file as well. Just talking about his time on the USS Blanche Sigmund, which was a hospital ship. And you can see there, if you can just make out, you can see how his eye's covered. Like Michael said, he took a wound to his eye and to his leg, and he's sitting up on the rail with some bandages on, and then also doing some what he calls daily exercises there on the right there. So Herbert Krauss, to recognize his Silver Star and his Purple Heart from the D-Day campaign there. Okay, so next we have Private Frank Williams, United States Army, World War II, from Allegheny County. He was born and enlisted from Pittsburgh, PA, and he actually received 3 Silver Stars. So here's another multiple awarded individual. He was killed in action on October 7th, 1944. That is actually during the last one of his medals, the last action for one of his Silver Stars. And it's amazing because the 3 actions that took place here, listen to these dates here. September 15th, 1944, that was the first one. September 20th, 1944, and then October 7th, 1944. So we're talking about, not even a full month. He receives 3 medals of honor in that 1 month and is killed in action on that last action on October 7th. And they all are somewhat similar and remind me a little bit of Tamasco's story. Just once again, the first one is he is a lead scout in front of his squad, fired on by heavy enemy machine gun. Without hesitation, he charged the gun emplacement and silenced the weapon, killed 1 hostile soldier, and captured another. And he was wounded in this action, but he continued to lead the attack. The second one, he was subject to heavy machine gun fire and directed from well-concealed positions on both sides of the road. So he courageously left his place of cover and moved toward the hostile emplacement to his immediate front. By creeping and crawling part of the distance, then by running from tree to tree, he worked his way to an advantageous position nearing the enemy gun. He ended up killing 1 hostile soldier and taking another 1 prisoner, and was once again wounded. And then the third one, on October 7th, he courageously exposed himself in order to obtain a clear field of fire. In spite of small enemy fire, he moved to an advantageous position and opened fire on a hostile sniper. However, he is shot and killed, and is killed in action in that regard. So repeatedly exposing himself to enemy fire, obviously eliminating enemies, taking prisoners, just an amazing all-around story here. Like I said, he received 3 Purple Hearts and was killed in action on October 7th and is currently buried in Uniondale Cemetery. And he was inducted into our Hall of Valor in 2019, the same year as Herbert M. Krauss was inducted. So we wanted to recognize Frank Williams and 3 Silver Stars that he received in World War II. And then our next one, Staff Sergeant Gary Radford, United States Army. Now we're in Vietnam. This is 1969. He once again is a Pittsburgh man, born and enlisted in Pittsburgh, PA. And Michael, maybe you can tell us a little bit about Gary's story.
Yeah, Gary was a platoon leader in the 101st Airborne. He got this Silver Star medal for operations against a hostile force in the A Shaw Valley in Vietnam in 1969. He was a ranger. He had finished ranger school, was a ranger, platoon leader. And we have some articles from him. But first, maybe I'll finish his citation and we can look at a couple of things that we own that belong to Sergeant Radford. While serving as a platoon leader in Company D, 2nd Battalion, 506th Infantry, 101st Airborne, Sergeant Radford's company came under intense fire from well-entrenched enemy positions. With the initial burst of insurgent fire wounding the lead man, sorry, there's a period there. Without regard for his own welfare, Radford pulled him to safety. He cleared the area for supporting gunships and then successfully led the assault against the hill. His successful use of hand grenades accounted for the destruction of 2 enemy positions. So again, he's out there. You know, these Silver Star men are on the ground. They're taking control. They're wiping out enemy soldiers in front of them. They're pulling in wounded. It's quite a story, and Radford is, his citation is right up there with all of them. And did you want to go to his? Yeah. So we have these pieces. Radford continued to serve after, of course, after this action here in the Ashaw Valley. He was at Firebase Ripcord, where the 101st was. They were close to the northern border of South Vietnam, and they were trying to curtail the amount of weapons and enemy activity that was coming into South Vietnam. Radford was on patrol with leading a patrol, and his lead man, they were ambushed. His lead man was killed. Second man went down. Radford tried to crawl to aid them, and he discovered the first man was dead. He actually got to him and was trying to get to the second man, but an enemy satchel charge was hurled next to him and blew up. And he then was out of commission and had to be rescued. Years later, those two bodies were never recovered, the two men that Radford were in his platoon. And years later, Radford was invited to go on an MIA mission to find them. And these are two of the articles he brought back from that mission. They did not find the two soldiers, but they did find this American helmet with a hole through it, whether it's rust or a bullet hole, it's hard to determine. But they also found a rusted M60 machine gun, and that numbers were on that gun, and they were able to identify that as the machine gun that his assistant machine gunner had, who was one of the people that was not recovered. So it's quite a story. We've met Gary Radford and spoken to him, and it's quite a guy, and it was a mission of his to, personal mission to try to bring those men home, which has yet to happen.
Yeah, I know when I got to meet him, he's so unassuming. He actually came in and wanted to get a copy of his plaque, and people do that. Family members do that all the time. I assumed he was a family member at that moment. And I said, "Oh, are you related to Mr. Radford?" And he said, "No, it's me." Frankly, no, that's me. And I, of course, was taken back and explained what an honor it was to meet him. I've been telling his story on tours and on programs like this for years, and it's very true about a lot of these individuals that we meet. It's such an honor when we have the veteran that's actually alive when they get inducted into our Hall of Valor, and you get the same kind of feeling from each of them, how unassuming they are. They're not looking for credit. There's oftentimes that that the individual won't even be nominated for the Hall of Valor if it wasn't for their family. Their family is the one who really wants the recognition for their loved one. The individual that received the medal oftentimes isn't even really looking for the recognition. So it is a real honor to meet them, and Gary Radford's one of those ones that we're very lucky to have met and spent some time with. I think I'll take a break here and point out that we have a very nice comment here that I think speaks to what we're talking about. This is from Andrew Capitz. I know Andrew. How are you doing? He's a good, a longtime listener. He's even joined us for one of these programs. And he says, when we submitted the application for Larry Homan, who was in Vietnam, to be inducted into the Hall of Valor, we learned that the citation did not follow his personnel file. This made it more difficult to prove the citation until we dug deeper into the Army's records. Perhaps this explains why there's no official list of recipients. I think that's a pretty good observation, and probably very true. There's certainly situations where we have individuals that come to us looking to be inducted into our Hall of Valor, and they even have the medal itself, but they don't have any of the paperwork that goes with it. So it is very tricky, and it's certainly one of the more frustrating parts of my job when I have to have those difficult conversations with people about establishing the proper paperwork and trying to dig that up. And I know, Andrew, you've put in a lot of legwork to get Mr. Homan inducted, and we appreciate your efforts in that and your support with our program here with Spotlight On. Okay, our next one here, we're going to move on to, I should say, I just wanted to end up, Gary Radford was inducted into the Hall of Valor in 1989. So, and he was actually nominated by VVI, the Vietnam Veterans Incorporated. So I just kind of end with that to say, here's another situation where, somebody else nominated him. This was not him coming to us saying, put me in the Hall of Valor. He was nominated and brought to our attention by the Vietnam Veterans Incorporated here in Pittsburgh. Okay, our next example here is David Kassoon, and he was born in Katanning, PA, graduated from Valley Forge Military Academy, enlisted from Indiana, PA, and would serve in Vietnam in 1968 until May 18th of 1969, when he was sent to an Army hospital in Japan. He received 2 Purple Hearts and is credited as the most decorated soldier from Vietnam, from the Vietnam War, from Indiana County. And the reason that he gets that distinction is, you can kind of make out on his plaque there, he was awarded a Distinguished Service Cross and a Silver Star. And he was inducted into our Hall of Valor in 2003. Now, one of the reasons I wanted to use this as an example here is because we're seeing now 2 separate medals awarded. And Michael and I were having this conversation, how it can kind of be difficult to figure out what's the difference here between the Silver Star and the Distinguished Cross. What takes something to that next level, to the Distinguished Cross? And Michael, we had that conversation right before we came on, and there is no real exact definition or criteria or reasoning behind that, right, Michael? Looks like we might have frozen Michael there. That's okay. I'll continue on here. But one of the reasons I chose this one was because we have 2 citations right side by side here, looking at that were awarded to this individual, and maybe there was some evidence of why one was bumped up or nominated and receiving the Distinguished Service Cross, and one was the Silver Star Medal. So if we look at the Distinguished Service Cross citation, this is October 7th and 8th, 1968. And he is in the jungle undergrowth in an area when a large enemy force firing small arms and automatic weapons from a well-concealed position engages them. Ignoring the intense enemy fire, Sergeant led his men to an aggressive assault towards the positions. As they neared the hostile position, an enemy hand grenade landed beside Sergeant Kassoon. Reacting immediately, he grabbed the grenade and tossed it back at the enemy. So that's one of those things you see in a movie, right? The grenade comes at him. He, disregarded for his own safety, goes at that grenade and throws it back towards the enemy. However, the grenade does detonate a few feet in front of the sergeant and inflicts serious wounds to his head and shoulder. So he gets it away from the men, but he still is pretty badly wounded from that. But he refuses to be evacuated, and he continues to move forward and secure Allied radio. It's the perimeter to secure an Allied radio that had been abandoned during the previous engagement. During this maneuver, he engages and eliminated an enemy soldier in hand-to-hand combat. Then, returning to his company's position, he prepared his men for aggressive enemy ground attack. During this assault, the sergeant continuously moved from one position to another to direct the fire of his men and pinpoint enemy targets. Sergeant Kassoon's extraordinary heroism and devotion to duty were in keeping with the highest traditions of our military service. So you're getting this story kind of playing out here, where he not only does the grenade and gets that out of the way, refuses to be evacuated, continues fighting, finds himself engaged in hand-to-hand combat and eliminates a soldier in hand-to-hand combat, and ends up still moving forward and directing fire and exposing himself to enemy fire. So you kind of put all that together, and it's adding up to the Distinguished Service Cross for those actions, like I said, October 7th and 8th, 1968. Now, if you fast forward a little bit to May 18th, 1969, this is when he is going to receive a Silver Star. And the Silver Star is when he expertly maneuvered his platoon to a forward position to support the retaliatory fire of a stalled lead platoon. Despite the continuing intense fire, he moved from position to position, directing the fire of his men. While performing this courageous act, he was seriously wounded by enemy fire. Disregarding his wound, he remained with his men, moving them into more strategic locations, directing fire and personally attacking enemy positions under his ammunition until his ammunition was expended. I think we have Michael back here. I'll bring him up here and just keep going. When the order was received to withdraw, he assisted in executing, evacuating, I should say, other wounded comrades and remained on the hill until all casualties had been withdrawn. And it does appear that that wound that he suffered there would lead to him being pulled out and sent to the hospital in Japan. So, you read those two citations and you get a lot of the same kind of feeling for both of them, except the Distinguished Service Cross does have, the two elements, the grenade scenario and the hand-to-hand combat and eliminating an enemy target. But he is certainly wounded in both situations, exposing himself to enemy fire in both situations. So I can't even say, unfortunately, my plan here worked, Michael. I was hoping to get a little bit of a distinction between the two medals and kind of understand a little bit more about what could be the difference. But as we said, there's not much rhyme or reason that can be directly pointed to, right, as far as what's the distinction here.
Yeah, I mean, before I blinked out of there, our conversation was about what would be the difference. And certainly there are subtleties, but we both thought that it might have been done from the way that they were written up by the officer in charge. And that would have gone on then to the Army for the medals and decorations review, and perhaps they thought it was worthy of something higher, or it was okay where it was. So yeah, we don't know. Neither of us are veterans, and neither of us were in that situation on how that distinction was made. But I agree with you. There does seem to be more intensity in the Distinguished Service Cross citation than there was in the Silver Star for Mr. Kaysen.
Yeah, and I think you brought up a good point there about this is coming from a nomination, usually from a commanding officer. It also has to come with eyewitness reports in order to justify this, and sometimes those don't always line up to where they need to. So I do find it just a reality, let's say, that there are certainly individuals that have done actions that deserved medals that didn't receive them because there was no eyewitnesses or there's no way to prove it. And there's probably people that should be bumped up or higher up in the order of medals. But once again, somebody reporting, there could have been, I don't want to get too much into this, but a grudge, some politics. Who knows? There's a lot of factors that could go into why an individual is nominated for a specific medal. But I did like the chance here to kind of put ones side by side here. All right, I think we have a couple more here. Our next one is Captain John Corey, United States Army from Vietnam, 1969. Spent time in Westmoreland County and Washington County. He was born in New Kensington, PA. He graduated from Washington and Jefferson College in 1968 and enlisted from Washington, PA. He actually resides in Arizona, and he was inducted into our Hall of Valor in 2018. And the reason I selected Mr. Corey here is because he once again has two medals, but instead of the Silver Star and then the one above, he actually has a Silver Star and one below, which is the Distinguished Flying Cross. Both medals qualify for our Hall of Valor, but it's just a different order, right? And now we're going kind of down the line as opposed to up the line. And he did receive his Silver Star on May 27th, 1969. And he was basically realizing that the only way to rescue wounded men was to silence an enemy machine gun and automatic weapons position, managed to crawl to a location close enough to destroy the element with 2 hand grenades. And although he was under intense enemy fire, he accomplished this mission. He then charged 2 other enemy soldiers, destroying them with rifle fire and dispersing several others. And he dragged wounded men approximately 20 yards to safety. He continues to organize after an ambush, and he exposes himself to enemy fire, moved to a position which afforded the opportunity to direct M79 and rifle fire at enemy position, which caused a secondary explosion in the enemy area, thwarting the ambush. The entire enemy unit withdrawal, and Corey administered first aid to wounded men and supervised the safe evacuation of his patrol. So here's a situation. He receives a Silver Star for actions on the ground, which makes sense. He's satisfying all those gallantry in action in combat against the enemy. When you get to his Distinguished Flying Cross, he's in a whole different situation. He's in a helicopter at this point. So this does kind of make sense a little bit in my trying to rationale here, because now on September 9th, 1969, so a little bit later that same year, he is spotting enemy troop movements on the ground from his helicopter as a forward observer. He's consistently called in and effectively directed air and artillery strikes on North Vietnamese Army troop concentrations, in spite of exceptionally heavy enemy ground fire, for which his aircraft is hit in several places. Corey and his pilot, who were both struck by shrapnel, elected to attack the enemy position in their light observation helicopter, utilizing white phosphorus grenades to destroy the machine gun emplacement, as well as confirming the size of the enemy unit. He was seriously wounded, and the aircraft commander is the aircraft commander is severely wounded, and he, John Corey, successfully crash lands the extensively damaged helicopter. And for that, he receives the Distinguished Flying Cross. So, if you know much about these observation helicopters, they were not meant to conduct operations like this. However, he risked himself and his co-pilot, or his the guy with him in the helicopter. They risked their lives to eliminate the enemy through this observation situation.
Yeah, you're right. They're actually a very small helicopter, and they fly over a combat area, and they can direct fire and observe. Often they can spot where the enemy is. They have radio contact on the ground, and with if they need to call in any other air support, they have the ability to do that too. But they're not a big gunship like you usually see, like a Huey with rockets and machine guns. It's a little small helicopter. And I find it pretty amazing that, he's an artillery officer and he gets a Distinguished Flying Cross, which is saying something, about his ability to kind of fit in a lot of places. And also in the first citation, it mentions that he was serving as a long-range patrol leader, and there's kind of an acronym for that it's called LRP, LRP, and those are guys that went out for weeks at a time, often, and were infiltrating, gathering information, living off the land, fighting. So they're pretty highly trained special forces units that are doing that LRP operation.
Yeah, and I have a quote that he was interviewed by his by Washington Jefferson, is where he went to school, and I just like the way he answers this question. The question is, what was the combat situation as to which you were awarded on? And he says, circumstances regarding my award of the Silver Star were certainly not a matter of planning or intentions by any means. They never are. What occurred is described in detail in the award narrative. After that experience, I never thought I'd ever be in such an intense situation again. However, I was subsequently awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross, Bronze Star for Valor, Air Medal for Valor, Purple Heart, Soldier's Medal, Vietnam Cross of Gallantry, and Valorous Unit Citation, Air Combat Crewman Badge, and Combat Infantry Badge. It is pretty apparent I was not fortunate enough to avoid similar situations after I received the Silver Star. So, as you can see, he certainly was involved in quite a bit in Vietnam, and highly decorated, and another one that we were very lucky and honored to meet when he was here for his induction in 2018. As I said, he does live in Arizona now, but he came into town for this induction, and another one that we had the great honor of spending some time with on that day. And then finally, our last one here is Staff Sergeant Stefan A. Booker, United States Army in the Middle East in 2003. He's from Armstrong County. He was actually from Apollo, PA. And of course, this is now in the Middle East in Iraq. And this is a situation where he was awarded the Silver Star originally. However, in a review of that, and this is there was a review by this Army Decorations Board. They were reviewing all these recommendations, and the Secretary of the Army made the determination that Staff Sergeant Booker be awarded the Army Distinguished Service Cross in recognition of gallantry and intrepidity and heroism above and beyond the call of duty. So here's a situation where he is awarded the Silver Star. He is actually killed in action in this engagement, and we'll talk a little bit about the engagement here in a minute. But he is killed in action, but posthumously, the review board reviews the situation and bumps that Silver Star up to a Distinguished Service Cross. So just wanted to point out that that can happen. These things do get reviewed. There's the board that we've mentioned here a couple times that is taking a look at these, and he is an example of somebody. And it's really interesting because we had the ceremony when they bumped the medal up. We had the ceremony at Soldiers and Sailors, and we're able to meet some of his family and meet some of the guys that served alongside of him. And it was a real honor to be a host for that event here. But he was awarded this medal for when his platoon came under heavy small arms and rocket-propelled grenade fire. He took immediate control and returned fire with his tank-mounted machine gun. When the machine gun failed, disregarding his own safety, he laid in a prone position on top of the tank and returned fire with his personal weapon. He identified an enemy troop carrier and engaged and destroyed it. Mortally wounded because he was in an exposed position, his actions and accurate communications inspired his platoon, and he was killed in action, as we said, on April 5th, 2003. So, amazing story. The young man from Apollo, PA, laying on top of that tank with his personal weapon, taking out an enemy troop carrier. However, he is killed in action. And more recently, they have actually named a military vehicle after him. The M10 Booker vehicle was named in his honor. And we see a photo of that there. It's basically a light tank, probably very similar to the one that he was in, but obviously a newer model, and it was renamed in his honor. So we wanted to recognize Stephen A. Booker. And Michael, I think you were there, right? Were you there for the ceremony as well?
Yeah.
We bumped that up. Yeah.
Yeah, it was the 3rd Infantry, and they brought there was the commander of the 3rd Infantry, a general, was here, and many of his guys who served with him, who knew him personally, and all were interested in seeing him get this upgrade in the medal. So it was quite a ceremony. It was a whole ceremony dedicated just to him and this upgrade.
And I know, talking with some of the guys that served with him, they all were, so just in awe of him as a leader and as a soldier, as a man, as a person, and then to see them interact with his family, it was very emotional and very nice to see him get that recognition and have that Silver Star upgraded to the Distinguished Service Cross. So I think with that's going to bring us to the end here. I don't see any questions. I do thank you for your comment, Andrew, throughout this program here. And as usual, I like to bring up what's coming up at the museum. We have our Tabletop Gamers. Next one is coming up on Saturday, April 26th. If you're a military tabletop gamer or miniature enthusiast out there, you need to come to our Tabletop Gamers on Saturdays. There's one Saturday a month where we get together and play military board games and miniatures games, and it's a great experience to get together and share our love for history. And then also, of course, one of our biggest and most important days at Soldiers and Sailors is our Memorial Day celebration, which will be coming up on Monday, May 26th. Free event, family activities all day long, ceremony to recognize the true meaning of Memorial Day. It's a great time to visit Soldiers and Sailors. If you haven't been, this is the time to come. It's free, and there's so much going on. There's lots of people coming. We have fun, but we also take moments to recognize the significance of and the true meaning of Memorial Day. And to learn more about the Memorial Day celebration and all the other events, please visit our website, soldiersandsailorshall.org. And then finally, for our next program next month on May 8th, our Spotlight On will focus on a look at Pittsburgh Zouaves. And that might not even mean anything to some of you. Michael, what do you want to just give us a little teaser? What a Zouave? Where's that word coming from?
Well, it's a very odd name, and a lot of people there. In my lifetime, I've heard many pronunciations. Correct one is Zouave, but it has to do with soldiers who. Moroccan Algerian soldiers who wore very baggy trousers and short little jackets, and I'll leave it at that. They're the model for the American Zouaves that would follow.
Yeah. So you'll have to tune in next month to learn all about Pittsburgh Zouaves and some of the stories we have in our museum related to that. So with that, I want to say thank you all for joining us tonight. Michael, thank you, of course, as always, for helping out and bringing all that great information. And Thank you, everybody, and I hope to see you all next month. I hope to see you at Soldiers and Sailors. Take care, everybody.